Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and we need to break down the full historical timeline of the Alien and the conjoined Predator franchise ahead of FX's Alien Earth, which is coming to FX and Hulu on August 12th. This is a new series from Noah Hawley set in the Alien universe, and I am recording this from the Alien Earth podcast space at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was right here where I interviewed Noah Hawley and actor Alex Lothar in a thrilling conversation about everything Weyland-Yutani and some crazy theories that I had going into this series. I was also fortunate to talk to Dan Trachtenberg, director of Predator Badlands, here at San Diego Comic-Con on another day, and I can tell you it's just never been more important to know the full cinematic history of both of these great franchises, and I'm gonna do all of it in this video. And it's just so cool to be able to do this by the Alien Earth activation here at Comic-Con. We don't normally get to make videos off-site like this, and I'm just so grateful to the whole production team here for helping me do it right here. Okay, so here's the thing to know about the Alien and Predator timelines. The canonicity is kind of all over the place in a wonderful way. In general, for these upcoming titles, in my opinion, the only thing that you really need to know that well are like the original titles and the recent titles, because only those seem to be connecting in a more direct way as you're going into them, in any logical sense at least. But everything that exists in these franchises is worth watching. All of it is fun and great, and it's gonna all have a different kind of influence on these upcoming titles. I think we're gonna be surprised what past lore echoes in these new releases. Like, for example, Fede Alvarez, the director of Alien Romulus, definitely threw a nod to, of all things, Alien Resurrection in the final act of that movie. Dan Trachtenberg is totally adding nods to the Predator games, the other alien species on Deck's trophy wall, and of course, tons of Weyland-Yutani Easter eggs. And I think we need to know both of the franchises now, because it might be the case that we're headed back to another Alien versus Predator, but like a really, really fun crossover event. So in total, there are 7 Alien films, including last year's Alien Romulus. There's 1 live-action Alien series, this upcoming Alien Earth, that's coming to FX and Hulu on August 12th. There are 6 Predator movies, including this year's animated Predator Killer of Killers and the upcoming live-action film Predator Badlands, 2 Alien versus Predator movies that are largely considered not canonical, and then a ton of comic books and novels and games, including games like Alien Isolation, Predator Concrete Jungle, and Predator Hunting Grounds. For Alien Earth, Noah Hawley has said that he is more interested in the concepts that were explored in Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien and James Cameron's 1986 Aliens, which is also largely what director Fede Alvarez did with Alien Romulus, which was set in between those two films. With Prometheus and Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott established some lore about the engineers and the synth David, and implications about David's involvement perhaps with xenomorph history and genealogy, all stuff that no one in these titles is outright negating or retconning, but they're just not really exploring with their stories. By setting Alien Earth just 2 years before the 1979 Alien film events, Noah Hawley seems to be exploring the world and the context that led to what happened to the Nostromo crew. Meanwhile, for Predator Badlands, Dan Trachtenberg seems separately interested in the culture of the Yautja species, and he's going to be using Weyland-Yutani as a way to compare the morality between the earthly corporations and these extraterrestrial killers with their interesting code. So, going back through the historical timeline, the legend really begins 3.2 billion years BC, which is believed to be the date of the Prometheus prologue, which is when we saw an engineer on planet Earth in ancient times sacrificing himself by drinking the black liquid, which disintegrated his body and really was what caused the advanced DNA and the great biodiversity of life on Earth. Then, moving ahead to 2996 BC, this is what we saw in Alien versus Predator. It was established that the Yautja species actually visited Earth in these ancient years, but more recent than what we saw in Prometheus, and they did this to teach civilizations like the Mayans to build pyramids, and the Yautja were worshipped as gods. And then in the century that followed, the Yautja would participate in human hunting rituals, but Alien vs. Predator then established that these rituals were interrupted by rival xenomorphs on Earth in these ancient years, and that might be part of the backstory that we're now, letting go of, because most other later titles have suggested that the xenomorphs were never on Earth this far in the past. So moving ahead to 34 AD. Now I have to include this because there was an early script draft of Prometheus that implied that Jesus freaking Christ on Earth was an engineer experiment. In the script, we read, "We took a mother's child back to paradise and educated him, taught him the meaning of life and creation. We put him back into Eden to educate your kind, but your kind decided to punish him. We gave you the fruits of life and you repay us by leaving it to rot." Yep. That's Ridley Scott's canon. Moving ahead to the 1st century AD, we did learn in Prometheus that the engineers on the planet LV-223 formed a plan to wipe out humanity via the black liquid, but that pathogen got loose and it ended up killing them, setting that whole crime scene that they stumbled upon in Prometheus. Moving ahead to 841 AD. So this is the date of the first act of this year's past animated release, Predator Killer of Killers. And I will be spoiling Predator Killer of Killers in this video, as with all the past titles that I'm gonna talk about in this timeline. So just be warned, pause this video, go watch it, and you really should. It's really, really good. But in 841 AD, we're in the 9th century of Scandinavia, following the Viking warrior Ursa and her son Anders. They're on a mission to avenge Ursa's father from a rival clan, but then her warriors get wiped out by a Yautja, and she defeats this Yautja in a vicious battle, but her son dies in her arms. We're gonna come back to her later. Now, there were also a series of Dark Horse comics throughout the 90s that established Yautja at different points in history on Earth, and I'm gonna bring it up in this video just because it seems like some of it is inspiring what Dan Trachtenberg is doing with his Predator films, and we might now see tying over with the Alien films, so I'm gonna bring it up, but really just in these past historical periods, because it's also his agenda. So, back in 1300 in Bulgaria, we saw that Alien vs. Predator Old Secrets, a 1999 comic. We know a Yautja also showed up in 1325 in China. That was showed in Alien vs. Predator Eternal. In 1700 in Japan, that was the backstory of Predator Blood Feud. In 1718, on a pirate ship off the African Guinea coast, that was shown in Predator 2 Predator 1718. Now, in 1609 to 1629, that's the period where we see the second act of Predator Killer of Killers, the Sword. It follows brothers Kinji and Kiyoshi in a conflict to succeed their father, who was a samurai warlord. A Yautja gets involved in this conflict, and the more aggressive of the brothers, Kiyoshi, gets injured in this fight, but both brothers are able to work together to kill the Yautja, but Kiyoshi dies, leaving Kenji alive. Now we arrive at 1719, and we are in the northern plains of North America. This is the year of the events of Dan Trachtenberg's 2022 film Prey, which is also very, very good. We meet a Comanche healer named Naru, who sets off to prove herself to her tribe and hunt what they call the Mupitzl, which they believe is a giant man-eating owl from a Comanche legend, and it's revealed actually to be a feral predator. This movie rocks. I can't say enough good things about this movie. But after this point in history, there are some other sightings of Yautjas that are referenced in comics. For example, 1863, during the Civil War in the Ozarks, that was Predator Hell Come A-Walkin'. 1881 to 1896, it was implied in Predator Nemesis that it was a predator from India going to London who was like a particular folklore legend in London. 1900 in Alaska, of all people, a duel with Wolverine from Marvel Comics in Predator vs. Wolverine. That brings us to 1904. In the Alien vs. Predator Unrated edition and the novelization included a backstory sequence in Antarctica on a whaling ship. These whalers see a Yautja fighting a xenomorph. That's another loosely canonical backstory though. Then more Yautja historical sightings from the comics. 1914 to 1916, World War I France, that was Predator, the Bloody Sands of Time, one of the many time periods in that comic story. 1919, Navajo Nation, New Mexico, that was from Predator Blood on Two Witch Mesa. 1926, Florida Everglades, that was Predator's God Truth. 1931 in Louisiana, that was Predator Strange Rue. 1936, Serengeti in Africa, that was Predator the Pride of Nagasa. And then 1931 to 1945 in Ecuador, that was on a Nazi gold quest in Predator the Hunted City. So that brings us to 1942. This is the third act of the Predator Killer of Killers story. In Northern Africa during World War II, fighter pilot Torres and his commander, Captain Vandy, run into a Yautja starship, and Vandy sacrifices himself so that Torres can get away. But then years after this war, Torres gets abducted by a different Yautja ship. Now, there are other Yautja historical sightings in the comics throughout the 20th century. In 1947 in New York City, that was Predator the Hunted City. 1958 in Oregon, that was in Predator Kindred. 1959 in Hollywood, Predator Predator, it came from the fourth dimension. 1968 in Vietnam, that was another part of Predator, The Bloody Sands of Time. And then 1984 in Nicaragua, a Predator destroys a Cobra training camp. This is mentioned in the AVP film, shown in the comic Predator Captive. But then we come to 1987, Guatemala. We are now at the events of the first Predator movie, the amazing film directed by John McTiernan, following Major Alan Dutch Schaefer, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Dylan, played by Carl Weathers. Shane Black, who will later direct one of these movies, shows up as an actor in this film, and they are part of an elite mercenary team who gets hunted by the first Predator that we actually saw on screen in the cinematic history. This film came out in 1987 and was set in the present day. But then we come to the year 1990, which according to the Weyland-Yutani timeline is the birth year of Peter Weyland. This year actually came from what was at the time a Weyland Industries company timeline on a website that was a Prometheus marketing tie-in website. The website's now defunct, but most alien nerds consider this to be basically the canonical history. There were other Yautja sightings from the comics that I just feel obligated to mention because it's still of the past of this universe. 1989 in New York City, actually a story with Dutch's brother, Predator Concrete Jungle, that was part of the game. 1990 in Siberia, that was Predator Cold War. In 1990 to 1992 in Chicago, that was Predator Race War. In 1991 in New Mexico, that was Predator Big Game. 1992 back in Nicaragua, that was another part of the Predator Bloody Sands of Time. 1992 in Japan, that was another part of the Predator Blood Feud story. 1992 in New Jersey, part of a story called Predator Bad Blood. 1994 in New Mexico, also part of the story of Predator Blood on Two Witch Mesa. And then 1996 in Guatemala, that was Predator Dark River. So now we arrive at 1997. Predator 2 is set in 1997, even though the film was released in 1990. They set it 7 years into its own future, which is an interesting choice. This is a different Predator who stalks the streets of Los Angeles, and he's faced down by LAPD Lieutenant Mike Harrigan, played by Danny Glover. Today's video is sponsored by Blue Chew. If you've made it to August without your fair share of summer lovin', you might need a better wingman. I'm not judging your friends, but if your buddy from work is already helping with the introductions, let Blue Chew help with. Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. These erection-enhancing tablets help men achieve stronger, harder, and longer-lasting erections for sexual activities. It's super easy too. Just sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. You can take Blue Chew anytime, day or night. That way you can plan ahead or be ready for whenever an opportunity arises. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. If you're skeptical or don't think you need it, try it free for a month and see. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. As always, your first month of Blue Chew is free. Just use the promo code Rockstars at checkout and pay $5 for shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's global mission to make better sex the dominant drive of modern society. Head to BlueChew.com for more details and safety info. Huge thanks to Blue Chew for sponsoring this revolution. Now, sometime after this, we get the fourth act of Predator Killer and Killers, when the characters Torres, Kenji, and Ursa all come back together from their different points in history, waking up from suspended animation in some unspecified future date that must be after 1997. And I'll get to reasons why in a second. But they're forced to fight in a big Yautja arena for a warlord that they call the Grendel King. Now, why does it have to be after 1997? Well, here at San Diego Comic-Con, one of the biggest announcements, Dan Trachtenberg shared that Killer of Killers originally had an epilogue scene that was removed that would have shown other past human warriors who had faced Yautjas over the years. We would have seen the animated bodies of Naru from Prey, that was from the year 1719, Danny Glover's Lieutenant Mike Harrigan from Predator 2 from the year 1997, and hell yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Dutch from Predator, the year 1987. So it must have been sometime after 1997. So other Yautja sightings from the comics that I should mention: 1997 off the coast of Chile from Predator Hell in Hot Water, 1998 in Nevada, that was Predator Captive, and then 1999 in Yellowstone, that was Predator Homeworld. So 2004, we now arrive at the events of Alien vs. Predator, which are set around a pyramid set in Antarctica, and we also saw an Alien vs. Predator Requiem, also set in 2004, where the events move on to rural Colorado. Again, because they established that the Yautja and the Xenomorphs have been these historical rivals for thousands of years. I don't know if that's going to be canonically true in the future Alien titles, specifically from Alien Earth. All right, in this first decade of this century, 2000 to 2010, a later TED Talk in the year 2023 that was depicted in Prometheus establishes how Peter Weyland said that this first decade saw a human race advancements in biotech, nanotech, fusion, fission, and M-theory. M-theory refers to a division of string theory, which postulates that there are 11 dimensions discovered so far and that they are all linked. So there is potentially room for a multiverse in the Alien vs. Predator franchise. I don't expect that to ever be that important. Other Yautja sightings from the comics: in 2007 in Iraq, that was Alien vs. Predator Sand Trap. In 2009 in Africa, that was Predator Prey to the Heavens. In 2010 were the events of Predators. That's another film that was set on an alien planet with a game reserve where humans are forced to fight. It's a similar kind of vibe, similar but not exactly the same as what's explored in Killer of Killers. Those warriors, though, were really selected for their skill of surviving and besting Yautjas in the past. 2015, that was, according to the timeline, when Peter Weyland's corporation launches a space mission that earns Weyland his first $1 billion, and he ends up getting a ton of VC capital funding. In 2018 are the events of Shane Black's The Predator, which is kind of a throwback film set in Mexico. In 2023 was Peter Weyland's famous TED Talk that was depicted in the opening act of Prometheus. In 2025, that's when the android known as David 1 is created, played by Michael Fassbender. All androids looked like him for the earlier decades, we think. 2026, Weyland acquires the company Genetech and privatizes NASA's Kepler mission, and within a year discovers 4,326 biocompatible planets. And it's from these planets where these early missions of the US CMS Maginot are going to acquire their samples. We also can derive from that Weyland-Yutani, and it's just Weyland at this time, has basically supplanted a lot of government agencies. And we're going to see over time that like the US government infrastructure is basically privatized by these major mega conglomerates. In 2028, Weyland Labs discover human hypersleep technology, an important piece of technology. 2029, Weyland wins the patent lawsuit against Yutani, who had been suing them. Up until this point, they were a separate company. This will lead to their eventual acquisition and merger. In 2031, Weyland begins terraforming colonies on the moon. Years later, in Alien Earth, we actually learn that a new company called Dynamic ends up terraforming and colonizing the moon. It was probably due to some kind of like lawsuit deal where they decided who owns what in the cosmos. 2034, faster than light travel is invented in this world, and they're applying some of these M-theory ideas. 2035, the NSF lifts regulations against commercial use of androids, and early David models are tested. And so these next 2 decades are pretty critical when it comes to what androids are rolled out on the company pipeline and on their missions, because 2055 is a very important new year that we're adding to the star date for Alien Earth, because that is the year the US CMS Maginot deep space mission begins. This is the Weyland-Yutani vessel that we see at the beginning of Alien Earth, and it's a show mostly that is set in 2120, but we learn that that mission started 65 years before the start of the show. So long before Weyland-Yutani embarked on any of the events of Prometheus, we're now going to see how they stumbled upon facehuggers and 4 other hostile species. They're going to get it from some source long before the Nostromo finds what they find, or before the crew of the Prometheus finds what they find. And those species are going to find their way to Earth in the year 2120. We also see how one of the crew people, the Maginot, is a synth or an android named Teng, and he does not look like David, which is interesting because it kind of undoes the prior held assumption that during these decades all the synths looked like Michael Fassbender. I don't even know if Ridley Scott ever said that that was firmly the case. All right, we move ahead to 2073. Classified findings by Weyland researchers unearth the coordinates to a new destination for Weyland's long-held personal mission called Project Prometheus to discover our origin and our creators. 2089, the events of Prometheus begin. Doctors Elizabeth Shaw and Charles Holloway discover a star map in a Scottish cave dating back to 35,000 years. This map points to a moon called LV-223. They present this map and others found in human art throughout history, suggesting early humans' understandings of gods are in fact a group of extraterrestrial engineers. 2091, the Prometheus mission launches. Shaw and Holloway join a crew funded by the Weyland Corporation with Meredith Vickers, Captain Janek, and David 8, and crew members Fifield and Milburn. A 101-year-old Peter Weyland himself is also on board. 2093, they wake up 2 years later after cryosleep on LV-223, and all the shit we learn about the engineers happens here. Sometime after these events of Prometheus, a movie that I think is underrated, but I get that it's not really going to fit in with a lot of people's minds on what they love about Alien, especially what Noah Hawley is exploring in Alien Earth. But one thing that we learn in Covenant is that a couple years after this, David will pilot an engineer warship back to the engineer home world and commits genocide on all of them. Basically, Prometheus setting fire to the gods in this case. 2099 is the official date where Weyland and Yutani merge as a corporation, and they form the Weyland-Yutani Corporation with the WY logo we're accustomed to seeing, which is important because anytime you see the WY logo, technically, according to the timeline, it has to take place after 2199, really the 22nd century. So 2104 are the events of Alien Covenant on Origin 6 with the crew of the Covenant and their over 1,000 human embryos in store. It turns out this film will kind of be the end of Ridley Scott's themes and lore that he was seeking to explore with his 21st century film releases. 2120 is when the series Alien Earth takes place. It's 2 years before the events of the 1979 Alien, which are set in 2122. There are now 5 corporations controlling Earth in a race for the best version of artificial life. Those 5 are Weyland-Yutani, Prodigy, which is a very important new corporation we're going to meet on the show, Dynamic, Lynch, and Threshold. Dynamic, we learn, owns the moon. Weyland-Yutani owns North and South America, as well as Mars and Saturn. Prodigy, headed by the eccentric trillionaire Boy Cavalier, seems to have some holdings in Southeast Asia and is now breaking new ground in hybrid technology to merge the minds of dying human kids into synth bodies. Trillionaire suggests a lot of things. Maybe that currency has depreciated enough due to years and years of inflation, because even a trillion of anything just sounds like a crazy amount of wealth for someone to have. Weyland-Yutani's ship, the US CSS Maginot, returns back into our solar system, and due to some outbreaks that happen on that vessel, ends up crashing into a Prodigy city, releasing 5 specimens into the area. That's kind of all we know about the series story so far, but at the center of the story is going to be one of the hybrids, Wendy, and her synth mentor, Kirsch, played by Timothy Oliphant. Now, we should know at this point a lot of the story that comes after this based off of the most famous Alien titles. The year 2022, that's when the events of the 1979 Alien take place on the Nostromo with Ripley, Dallas, Kane, Lambert, Parker, Brett, and Ash, and of course a wonderful cat named Jonesy. The Nostromo is redirected to LV-426, aka Acheron, to recover an alien specimen that later kills most of them, forcing Ripley to have to blow up the Nostromo and escape in the Narcissus escape shuttle, but not before having to blow that xenomorph out of the airlock. Now, retroactively, we can say that after the events of the Maginot, maybe Weyland-Yutani still didn't learn its lesson, except it now is directing other missions like vessels towing mineral ore to gather life forms, something that they're not at all equipped to do, using those people as expendable company collateral. And that's just even worse, that they were like, well, if the humans on board are going to die anyway, there's some kind of like a profit to be gained by just having these things on ships and just pointing those ships back at Earth, no matter what cities they crash into. 2037 are the events of the Alien Isolation game, which is technically not canon because you're playing as Ellen Ripley's daughter, Amanda, which the 1986 Alien film extended edition establishes was a different character. 2042 are the events of Alien Romulus. That's when a xenomorph cocoon is actually recovered from the wreckage of the Nostromo. Rain and her glitchy synth Andy plot to get out of a Weyland-Yutani work contract by scavenging a Weyland-Yutani space station where that cocoon hatched, and this space station is separated into separate modules, Romulus and Remus. Their plan is to steal cryosleep technology to get to a safe haven planet, but a xenomorph and facehuggers on the space station attack everybody. Poor Kay, as Bill said, after she gets infected, she was pregnant, she ends up giving birth to a freakish hybrid. Rain and Andy are able to escape and allow this other hybrid to crash into the rings of a planet. But there was a curious Easter egg in Romulus that we haven't talked enough about. Ripley's Narcissus shuttle was seen docked at that space station, and we see it separate from the rest of the space station before it disintegrates. So it suggests that her shuttle was also found adrift at some point between Alien and Aliens, and some of the people who were on the Romulus and Remus space station might have done something to it, or they didn't have a chance to yet. We don't really know, but I think they added it as an Easter egg. But either way, at the top of Aliens, Ripley's shuttle is found adrift in space. We come to the year of 2178. This is potentially when Predator Badlands takes place. If the mother software update number in the trailer is meant to be that date, that number could be independent of any year though. It must be sometime after the Weyland-Yutani merger of 2099. We're suspecting it will tie in with the events of Alien Romulus and maybe its forthcoming sequel. But the Yautja in this movie, Dek, is a runt initiate who is exiled from his clan, and he needs to prove himself, so he teams up with a synth named Thea, a Weyland-Yutani synth. Yep, that's right. Dek and Thea team up on a dangerous planet as Deck is hunting the different species. He himself also becomes hunted. But a lot of the film is going to be set on the Yautja homeworld of Yautja Prime, and we're going to hear a lot of their language in this film. But a Weyland-Yutani loader shows up, so I feel like it's got to be around the time of Aliens, which brings us to 2179, the events of James Cameron's Aliens from 1986, everything with Ripley and Burke going from the Colonial Marines crew to Hadley's Hope colony, having to save Newt from the alien queen, and eventually using the loader to fight the queen. Right after this movie ends, in the same year are the events of Alien 3, when Ripley finds herself in a penal colony, gets infected, and ends up diving into a furnace. Now, 2349 is really the furthest in the future we're going to go here. According to the Weyland-Yutani timeline, all mega corporations are outlawed at this point, but I wonder what that's going to mean for the new corporations we're going to meet in Alien Earth, including Prodigy and Dynamic. According to the lore, Weyland-Yutani continues to operate in secret, but this is the year of the events of Alien Resurrection. Ripley is cloned by the US military and resurrected, and an alien queen is surgically removed from her body. She's known as Ripley 8. This queen gives birth to a hybrid who recognizes Ripley as his mommy, and Ripley uses her acidic blood to open a hole in the ship to blow this baby out. The movie ends with the vessel, the Auriga, crashing into Earth. Now, one date I left out from this timeline is ancient Greece, because I didn't get a firm answer from Dan Trachtenberg as to whether the ancient Spartans might have actually learned their culture from the Code of the Yautja. I think it's a good theory, and he even gave me some hope for that. So the question I'm gonna leave you guys with is, are we headed for a new Alien vs. Predator? And will that Alien vs. Predator actually be really good? Because both of these directors, everybody making stuff from Noah Hawley to Fede Alvarez to Dan Trachtenberg, they're all creators who know what they're doing and are really good world builders. Deck's trophy wall has a variety of Easter eggs that we all keep asking Dan Trachtenberg about, including a possible xenomorph alien queen, but he, for now, is not giving any confirmations yet. I would imagine this AVP is going to be set off Earth, and I feel like Andy, the android, and Thea, the android, could be two synths that just kind of meet and become friends in the middle of it. Because if it's in the distant future, there's no reason why the two of them can't still be alive. Comment down below with your thoughts on all this. And again, thanks to the whole team here at FX and Hulu for Alien Earth at their activation at San Diego Comic-Con for allowing me to record this very long video in their studio space. I had a lot of fun talking to Noah and Alex yesterday. A special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Paulo Bianca, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels on the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.